we're just finishing off on our last tape. We were discussing the fact the inscriptions on the stone bowl are this King Udu, and we're only going to touch on it very lightly and very briefly here, as I think that it's going to lead into the chapter. We'll call this one the Wounded Bull. Now, the inscription on the stone bowl of King Udu, the inscription on this stone bowl of King Dur, is the earliest of all known historical Sumerian inscriptions, and thus the earliest known historical inscriptions in the world. But its unique historical importance consists in the inscription being written by the great grandson of the first Sumerian king, the founder of civilization, so-called, and it's recording at first hand his own genealogy and full back to the first Sumerian Aryan king. That's what Waddell says. The inscriber and dictator calls himself in this inscription by a personal name, Udu or Utu or Uduk, and he uses the title of the priest king of Kish city. But he is shown in the oldest Sumerian king list to be the fourth Sumerian king in the imperial line, all of which kings, as we shall see, were ex officio or priest kings. In the solar version, now get this, solar, you remember what we said about the Egyptians? There's all types of pictures and descriptions of ancient solar ships of Egypt, those who fly and they thought got their energy from the sun and whatever. But in the solar versions of the India or Indra list of the main line, he is the fourth imperial king, is called Yuda Vasu, V-A-S-U, or Yuda of the vase. See, this sacred cauldron, the Holy Grail, a title which we have seen to have been designated him as the custodian of the sacred bowl. Now, is there a possibility, too, in all fairness, was this referring to the fall of a great ancient king who the Bible talks about? He was the adversary, and he was beautiful from his beginning, and he was a guardian over the very house of the Almighty, but due to his disobedience, kicked out? There's a possibility we have a mixture here, I think, of both good guys and bad guys, and all of them come into this planet, and the historians and the records are so confused we can't tell the good guys from the bad guys. But anyway, we find in the lunar version of the India list, he is called, now get this, Y-A-Y-A-T-I, Ya-Atai. Yatai, Y-A-T-I, or Y-A-D-U. Now, and the Kish Chronicles is the fourth king in the imperial line, the third king of the so-called second of Kish dynasty. There, he is now called by his personal name, but is styled the devotee of Lord Sag, S-A-G-G, or Ash, or Uru Ash. Now, also Sagaga. Remember what we said about Lake Titicaca, the holy stone. Now, is it talking about Sagaga here through a different phonetical spelling? I think so, of the India list. These who, you see, we have the tales, we covered this about flying carpets, flying cities and all. These people who were able to transport themselves all over this planet. But wherein here we have seen that Sag is one of the sig titles of Thor in the Eddies, and S-A-K-K-O, Sakko, the title of Indra in the old Indian Fali. And now we find it significant that the grandfather and his inscription on this bowl, thus confirming his identity with the devotee of Lord Seg in the Kish Chronicles. It now appears very probable that it was this King Udu, the express devotee or worshipper of his relative, or radiantly, I don't know why they call him it radiantly illustrious great-grandfather who first defined the letter as the god of Seg or Saka in Endur. In other words, Indra, the ancient India, whose name also reads Ia, the source of Yah, J-A-H, or Father, J-U, Jew, or you, or Jupiter, or Jove. Now we found out that later on they used the name Jehovah, meaning a great Lord. Now Jove, borrowed from the Hebrew as Yahweh, or Jehovah. Now see, he was confused on this, but he makes a very valid point here. He doesn't seem to understand the difference between Yahweh or Jehovah. For the prefix title Ash or An, for Lord or King, it tends in this bowl's inscription and hereafter in Sumerian and Babylonian inscriptions and literature to have the sense of God as well as that of Lord. So see, maybe he did understand between Jehovah and Yahweh and so forth. Now, but the Babylonian inscription and literature seems to make the sense as God or Lord. Now, this now seems to explain for the first time why the later descendants of this deified first Aryan kings called themselves the sons of God. For they were the lineal descendants of that man who was made by the later people the type of the Father God. So now we can understand why the several Sumerian synonym titles here given for the name of the first king of Sag or Sagaga was written on this bowl, while illustrating the plurality of titles borne by the early Aryan kings. And the first king in particular, and they are of immense importance to establish the identity of the different king lists, where he often appears on one or other of these different titles cited in the table over the page, of which all are given in the Sumerian and Babylonian glossaries as synonyms for these names, as written on the bowl of Udu. The inscription, written in 8 lines, separated by horizontal strokes forming separate compartments, it reads as follows. Now I think we may get some clues here. It says, to the king or lord, Seg or Sag. Also, the Sumerian text lists it as Ash or Sagaga or Zagaga. Well, we won't get into all of those different names, but one I think that's rather interesting as we go down to one of the 5th sons who was listed as Nzuzu. And then the 7th that talks about a great city that was named after him called a Kham-Azai, Khamazi. And so we wonder later on, was this corrupted by the Chinese, or phonetically was it spelt to them? It talks about kamikaze, which means divine wind. So was it talking about an ancient priestcraft that came and flying on divine winds from the outer space? Now we find that also he puts in his footnotes here the prefix title Ash, A-S-H, as we spoke of Asher listed in the Bible, and it literally means the king or the Lord, and was literally used for God. So these people knew back in antiquity, they called themselves the descendant, the sons of God, the sons of Arthur, or the sons of the bull. And so we find the location of the Kham-Azai, Khamazi city, where the bull was captured as Kar-Shemish. In other words, talking about the great ancient priest line. Now the ancient genealogy inscribed on it in term precious or choice, and was given the chief place of honor in the sun cult by being deposited under the foundation of the tower of the oldest sun temple in Mesopotamia, and it must have been a very famous war trophy captured at the city of Kham-Azai, where the latter place was situated, and thereto has been quite unknown. It is how I now find undoubtedly Karshemish of the Hebrew Old Testament. Now, just a couple more little paragraphs we're going to deal with, and then we're going to drop this. But now we're quoting from Waddell here. He says, which we have seen was the last stronghold of the Hittites. Now, you remember back in Deuteronomy in the Old Testament, he said, I've placed 7 nations mightier and greater than thou before them, and go forth and utterly destroy them, the Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Hivites, Jebusites, and Perizzites. But now we're seeing this was the last stronghold of the Hittites on the upper Euphrates, where the river debauches onto the Mesopotamia plains, and was called by the Babylonians Karkamish, Kamish, or Gar, Gar-Gamish. Now we wonder, is this not a tie-in? Does this fit along with this ancient misunderstood tale, which they say is the oldest writing in the world, that goes back way over 5,000 years ago, when we hear about this great king, Gilgamesh? And so it's spelled very much the same way, and it sounds phonetically the same way. Instead of Gilgamesh, they talk about Gargamesh. And they go on to say this is the fort of Kemish, or Gamish. And it is this site also that the Nordic Eddies located the capture of the stone bowl, namely at the fort of Gymi, G-Y-M-I, or Gymis, G-Y-M-I-S, at Urd, U-R-D, the headquarters of the Weirdies of the Mother, Son, and Serpent cult at Jarovilla, V-E-L-I, now identified as Hieropolis, H-I-E-R-O-P-O-L-I-S, and Jarablush, J-E-R-A-B-L-U-S, at Karshemish. Now, it is also significant that the bowl is described in the inscription as broken. In other words, were they describing their connection to their mother planet, their first estate? They'd been cut off, they were broken. Now, for the Eddies, they detail the circumstances as to how the bowl became broken during its capture by Thor and his son. Were they taking back something that was originally theirs? Our Thor, the sons of the bull. Now, the title city, a Sumerian word also meaning town, is also applied to Kham-Azai, K-H-A-M-A-Z-I, but he says it does not necessarily imply that the place was a city at the time of the capture of the sacred bowl. On the contrary, the Sumerian literature credits King Sakai, S-A-K-A-H, or Sag, with founding the first city in the world. And his son was credited as founding the first city in Mesopotamia. Then the Eddies have preserved for us the tradition that this fort of Gymis, G-Y-M-I-S, consisted of a collection of underground burrows and cellars, and its fort was presumably a stockade. But the Eddies added that after its capture, it was made into a city by Thor, the people of the bull, and his descendants. The reference to it as a city by King Udu thus doubtlessly refers to its condition at the period and when he wrote. And then we find that as it goes on, it talks about the traditional fathers, and it talks about him having a son called Bacchus, B-A-K-U-S, and we know that he was supposed to be evil man and all, but I think that that's got lost in history. For the Sumerian variant title of Zig, which is written with a picture, now get this, of a horn, and was defined as horn, meaning exalted prince as decider, and also overthrown in a sense of victorious. It is this Zig form of his title which persists in the Nordic Eddies as a commoner title of Thor. So now we get an idea as to why they wore the iron hats with the horns on there representing Thor or their original state in outer space. Now, one other little point we're going to make, then we're going to get into some really good, heavy-duty, exciting things. Now, Jin is the name, G-I-N, it's the name of a second king on the bowl in agreement with the other list. The name Jin is for the second king, and in this bowl's inscription is seen to be a dialectic form of the word Gan, G-A-N, or K-A-N. Now remember, listen, does this ring a bell? Or Khan, agricultural title in other Sumerian lists, and a synonym of his Bacchus or Bacchus title, B-A-C-C-H-U-S, they switched to. Now, Jin means the increaser, and Gan or Khan, K-A-N, can, it means cultivate, beget of plants, made abundant, also field and produce. And thus this Jin title confirms his identity with Bacchus, the second king of the Kesh Chronicles and the son of the first king. So now, is there a possibility that this was talking about Cain? And was this Cain one and the same Bacchus? Remember? Let's see. Something very mysterious there, to say the least. And we find that Cain, instead of offering a blood sacrifice, he offered vegetables and the things of his own hand, and he was originally called a tiller of the soil, while Abel, he was a sheep herder. So just one other little thought to ponder at this point. Where in the beginning of the Bible, in Genesis, it talks about these plants and seeds and etc., it says before they were in the earth or this world. So, if these people are truly who we think they are, people of antiquity, that if this was Cain and some of these other people, if they were a mixture of not only the Adam descendants, the Semitic people, and Cain and some of those, did these people bring a lot, like wheat and a lot of these plants that seem to just appear mysteriously on this planet just a few thousand years ago, because we know that it cannot survive without the constant attention of man and his cultivating and protecting and harvesting it and so forth. Now, my friends, what I want to do is take you into the apocryphal writings. Some call it the book of Sirach. In most of the apocryphal writings, they called it Ecclesiasticus. But, my friends, this really puts the icing on the cake. You may have to listen to this more than once, and I think that it will prove itself. You'll see what I'm talking about. I think it's one of the most exciting things that I've run across yet. But let me give you a little bit of a background as it's introduced in this book of Ecclesiasticus from the very first chapter, the preface to it, written by the ancients. The prologue of the wisdom of Jesus, the son of Sirach. Whereas many and great things have been delivered unto us by the law and by the prophets. They're talking about prophets of old, even at this time, older prophets than themselves. And it says, by others that have followed in their steps, for which things we have given Israel the praise of instruction and wisdom. And since not only the readers must needs become skillful themselves, but they that love learning must be able to profit from them which are withheld, both by speaking and writing. My grandfather, Jesus, having much given himself to the reading of the law and the prophets and the other books of our fathers. As I've said, my friends, and as Scripture points out, there's many, many ancient books and writings that are missing. But fortunately, men like this Sirach here, he studied these things out and wrote of them and commented on them. And so we have a lot of lost clues here that I think are so fantastic, it's beyond the scope of your belief. Because I know many years ago I read it over and it left me wondering about it, and I thought I understood it. Well, I'll explain that as we get to it. He said, having given himself to the reading of the law and the prophets and other books of our fathers, having gained great familiarity therein, was drawn on also himself to write somewhat pertaining to instruction and wisdom, in order those who love learning and are addicted to these things might make progress much more by living according to the law. You are entreated, therefore, to read with favor and attention, and to pardon us if in any part what we have labored to interpret we may seem to fail in some of the phases. For things originally spoken in Hebrew, now remember what we said, the old ancient Hebrew that became extinct 400 years BC. Spoken in Hebrew have not the same force in them when they are translated into another tongue. And not only these, but the law itself and the prophecies and the rest of the books have no small difference when they are spoken in their original language. For having come in Egypt in the 8th and 13th year of Euergetes, the king, and having continued there some time, I found a copy affording no small instruction. I thought it therefore most necessary for me to apply some diligence and travail to interpret this book, applying indeed much watchfulness and skill in the space of time to bring the book to an end, and set it forth for them also who in the land of the sojourning are desirous to learn, and fashioning their manners thereforehand, so as to live according to the law. But no, my friends, hang on. I'm not going to give you a big, long tirade on the law, but something that is contained here that talks about from whence it came. Now, they're looking back to their most ancient progenitors, and I think that as we gave you in the foregoing about the ancient kings, these ancient men that settled on the earth, that were newly settled in India and Egypt and different parts of it. All right, now we'll go to Ecclesiasticus, the 48th verse, and we'll get some more clues here. Now, listen closely. If you have an apocryphal, I hope you do, and I hope that you will read the side notes on the pages, which unfortunately I'm not going to deal with very much, but it takes you back and it ties in. Every sentence and line here ties back into the rest of the Bible, confirming and proving that it gives the same message and it belongs there. Okay, let's see, verse 21 of chapter 49. And it tells about some divine intervention here. And he starts talking about in remote antiquity and refers to many of these people who came in contact with angels, which we proved in the Hebrew means messengers, extraterrestrial messengers, how they not only spoke with them, but interceded with them, and they also taught of the more ancient times. Now, this is one of my favorite tapes. He smote the camp of the Assyrians, and his angel utterly destroyed them, for Hezekiah did that which was pleasing to the Lord. He was strong in the ways of David his father. When Isaiah the prophet commanded, who was great and faithful in his vision, in other words, he was faithful to what he saw and wrote it down. In his day, the sun went backward. Now, remember what we said before about the sun going backward, or so it appeared, and we found that Venus interceded. Keep that in the back of your mind. And he added life to the king. Also, that's another incident where he actually appeared to change time. We saw by an excellent spirit what should come to pass at the last. In other words, the days that we're living in. I feel this is correct. And he comforted them that mourned in Zion. He showed the things which should be to the end of time, and the hidden things ere ever they came. Now, my friends, I'm going to leave an awful lot of this out and just try to deal with the high points. Now we go to chapter 49 and 8. It was Ezekiel who saw the vision of glory. Now we wonder what the vision of glory in, and we followed down to the footnotes, and it said the house of the veil. And I think we have proved not only through the regular 66 books, but also other places in the ecclesiastical writings and our other tapes, we showed that how the ancients, as even the scientists of today, confirm the fact that Venus is hid by layers of clouds. So this is what they mean, the veil. And also in the very first verse here, they go down and they say in the Greek it meant the horn. And we just got done discussing what the horn meant. Now he goes on, which God showed him upon the chariot of the cherubim. And we've discussed that in the Cherubs, the great spaceship, the chariot of God, like Ezekiel went to outer space. And now the 9th verse, for verily he remembered his enemies in storm, and to do good to them that directed their ways aright. Also of the 12 prophets, may the bones flourish again out of their place. He's talking about a future generation. But now we go to the 12th verse. So was Jesus the son of Josedek, Josedeak. It would be Josedek, who in their days builded the house. Now what is this house? A lot of people say, well, praise the Lord, brother, they built the house of God. And they've long assumed, as I did at one time, this was a house here on the earth. But I think that he's speaking of more ancient times, of a man, what we would call, they would probably, the religious world would call him a priest of God, but I would call him an engineer. Because actually, my friends, the Levitical priesthood, if it were to be reunited today, they would be classed as civil servants. And they exalted a people holy to the Lord, prepared for everlasting glory. Also of Nehemiah, the memorial is great. Now, you see, my friends, hang on. See, he's jumping around. He's talking about all kind of different men who went to outer space, who went to this house of the Almighty. And he goes on. Now, this seems mundane. He's building a church here. But I think as we go along, we will find differently. He said, who raised up for us, plural, the walls that were fallen. And it sounds like if this is a temple, a tabernacle, if it's the house of God, it sounds like it was damaged. He said he set up gates and bars and raised up our homes again. No man was created upon the earth such as was Enoch. Now Enoch, called the 7th from Adam, this is most ancient times. And remember, Enoch did not see death. He eventually went back to the house of God. For he was taken up from the earth. Neither was a man born like unto Joseph. Now he's talking about another great ancestor. A governor of his brethren, a stay of the people. Yea, his bones were visited. Shem and Seth were glorified among men. Now see, he's skipping around. And as the church world erroneously misunderstands this, that this was just single men. But it was representing a people or a tribe or a nation. So we have Shem there. And he was one of the supposed sons that came with Noah. But we'll find differently as Scripture contradicts that, or appears to. And then Seth was glorified among men, among Adamkind. Now remember, we told you in Genesis, he was the first recorded son of Adam. And the genealogy of Jesus Christ is traced back to Seth, who was the son of Adam, who was the son of God. And it goes on, let me repeat this. Shem and Seth were glorified among men, and above every living thing in the creation is Adam. Chapter 50, it was Simon, the son of Onas. Does that sound like some of the other ancient historical writings that we read from? The great priest, who in his life repaired the house. Now remember that you're going to see here where this changed from house, temple, tabernacle, etc., and then it finally winds up and tells where it was and what it was. Who in his lifetime repaired the house, in his days strengthened the temple. He strengthened it. Now hang on, we'll see. And by him was built from the foundation the heights of the double wall. Now my friends, I probably, on this tape, I will lose a lot of you. But that's fine. I don't do any compromising on the way to my horizon, if there be any. But, my friends, I think we'll find out, it's talking about this great space station that he built in outer space, and if you'll hang on, we're going to prove it here by the very words of this ancient prophet. We'll find that it was a double wall, where the outer wall is hit, and whatever in between there, it acts as a cushion. Like on, see, we think we're so brilliant on our new modern cars. We have these bumpers that have shocks on them and have springs and so forth to absorb the shock. Keep that in mind. Who by him was built from the foundation of the heights, the double wall, the lofty underworks of the enclosure of the temple. The lofty, in other words, something very high up, underworks of the enclosure of the temple. A double wall in a temple? I don't think anybody's ever found anything like that on this earth. Now bear with me. In his day, the cisterns of water were diminished. The brazen vessel encompassed as the sea. Now we could go off on that. That's a lot of things that the religious world has failed to understand, these types and shadows and allegories. This model that was built here on earth, that the plans were brought down from heaven, just like those of the Ark of the Covenant. They were to follow in great detail. And if we still had those artifacts and all we could see, there would be pictures of the great spaceships, and we could understand all of this. But anyway, the brazen vessels encompass as the sea. I believe that it was talking about these vessels that represented and showed where the house of the Almighty were out in the sea of space. It was he that took thought for his people that they should not fail, and he fortified the city against besieging. Now you see what it said from the house, it switched names on us, and now it goes, it's talking about something so big it's called a city. Just like John said he saw the holy city of God when he went there, and he referred to it as a new world in space. We've been through all that. How glorious was he when the people gathered around him at his coming forth out of the sanctuary, and the morning star in the midst of a cloud. As the morning star in the midst of a cloud. Now I believe that they have added that in there as the moon at the full. In other words, it shines, it reflects light like the moon when it's all lit up with the sun's reflection on it, when you have a full moon. Now get this, as the sun shining forth upon the temple of the Most High. Now my friends, he pins it down as to who it is and where it is. As the sun shining forth upon the temple of the Most High. The Almighty told Moses, he called it Zion. In other words, this was the government in space where all laws were issued from, and it was from there that Moses brought the law back from. And he said also, this is my house forever. And he told the disciples, they wanted to build a temple for Elijah, they wanted to build one for Moses, and they wanted to build one for Jesus. And he said, look, boys, the earth is my footstool. The heavens is my home. And he says, what man will build a house for me? See, they wanted to start 3 different religions there. Now, he gives us another clue as to where it is. In John and Ezekiel and others describe it, if you look up this rainbow, as the rainbow giving light in clouds of glory. In the clouds of glory. We're talking about Only the Almighty's glorious. Only His house is glorious. Now get this. As the flower of roses in the day of new fruits. Remember, we've heard Christ called the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star, but the religious world has lost all that. They have no inkling as to what it was talking about. As lilies at the water spring, at the shoot of the frankincense tree in the time of summer. Now, we told you before how Scripture tells us about the trees that were in the garden, planets that were populated, that were called houses or family trees. Do you remember at the birth of Christ, the wise men, which I claim they were not from this earth, they said they saw His star in the east. There must have been a great change in it, in its appearance, or in its movements, because wise men came from all over. And one of the things they brought Him was frankincense. I know it had a significance, but it was used by earthmen in embalming. But just think about that. As fire and incense in the censer. We're talking about a round bowl that gave off a fragrance. And it had like clouds and fire coming on. As a vessel all of beaten gold. Now it's referred to as a vessel here. Now, what did John say in the book of Revelation where the streets were paved of gold as it appeared? Now it goes on to say, adorned with all manner of precious stones. Was this not John's description of this holy, heavenly city? Then he goes on to say, now again it refers to another family tree, as an olive tree budding forth fruits. Now what does it say in Revelation? The leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. The leaves of the trees, as part of the tree, it's talking about sons and daughters from these extraterrestrial heavenly trees that the Almighty said the watchers would go to the four corners of the heavens and they would collect them and they would bring them back. Now again it talks about another type of tree and something very high up. And as a cypress growing high among the clouds. When He took up the robe of glory and put on the perfection of exaltation. Now listen to this next one. In the ascent, something coming down, in the ascent of the holy altar. Remember what we said? We went into Bullinger's and how these ancient astronomical signs, which our scientists today still use the names, but they do not understand the significance, the allegory, the picture, the type, the shadow that it paints in the heavens. And if we understood that in the moving and the alignment of these planets, and when they get in different positions, we would know exactly what was taking place at an exact predestined, ordained time by the Almighty. But my friends, like Christ truly said, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Now get this. This is part of the 11th verse of chapter 50. When He took up the robes of glory and put on the perfection of exaltation in the ascent of the holy altar, He made glorious the precinct of the sanctuary. Now He reverts and calls it a sanctuary. And David used very much the same place, that it was his sanctuary, that it was his hiding place, his place of safety. He made, and the precinct, like you talk to a policeman friend in one of these large cities, and you say, where is your police station located? Well, he would say in precinct 3. Like Paul would probably say, in the third heaven. And then he received the portions out of the priest's hands, himself also standing by the hearth of the altar. Now again it verts back to an altar. Now, to keep this a little more brief, we go on and let's jump to verse 27. And here's what this ancient prophet wrote down. I have written in this book the instructions of understanding and knowledge. And I, Jesus, the son of Sirach Elziar of Jerusalem, who out of his heart poured forth wisdom. Blessed is he that shall be exercised in these things, and he that layeth them up in his heart shall become wise. For if he do them, he shall be strong to all things, for the light of the Lord is his guide. Now it's talking about a light, a house. It's something that shall be his guide. Now we jump over to the 51st chapter and start with verse 17. Now remember, John of Revelation, he referred to it as her, as a bride adorned for her husband. He goes on and he said, I profited in her. Unto him that giveth me wisdom I will give glory. For I purpose to practice her, and I was zealous for that which is good. And I shall never be put to shame, for my soul has wrestled in her, and in my doing I was exact. I spread forth my hands to the heavens above, and bewailed my ignorance of her. I set my soul aright unto her, and in pureness I found her, and I got me a heart joined with her from the beginning. See, from the beginning, he, his ancestors, his progenitors, he realized that his progenitors came out of her. Therefore shall I not forsake. My inward part also was troubled to seek her. Therefore I have gotten a good possession. The Lord has given me a tongue for my reward, and I will praise him therewith. Draw near unto me, ye unlearned, and lodge in the house of instruction. My friends, it's from there where all law, all knowledge, all instruction has come from. Say, wherefore are you lacking in these things, and your souls are very thirsty? I opened my mouth and spake. Get her for yourselves without money. Put your neck under the yoke, and let your soul receive instructions. She is hard at hand to find. Behold with your eyes. In other words, her you can see her with your eyes. Now, a lot of people I know at first, like in Proverbs 8, I thought this was just talking about wisdom and knowledge. But from when and where and whence does this knowledge and this glory, this house, this sanctuary, this morning star, where does it come from? Howbeit I labored but a little, and found myself much rest. Get your instructions with a great sum of silver, and gain much gold by her. May your soul rejoice in his mercy, and may ye not be able to be put to shame in praising him. Work your work before the time cometh, and in this time he will give, and in his time he will give you your reward. Everybody wants to go to heaven, my friends. Hopefully this will help you and give you a destination, something to shoot for, that you may return to her, the womb of the morning star, Venus, if you would. My friends, what I'm trying to show you here, as he said in the 50th chapter, the 6th verse, and the morning star in the midst of a cloud. He tells you where this temple is. It was wounded after a great war, like Revelations, the 12th chapter, said there was, past tense, a great war in the heavens. And it talked about the red dragon, the adversary, who had been the guardian of the very throne the house of the Almighty. And even they had damaged the very house of the Almighty. But now, back here, trying to make it flow just a little bit, where it spoke of, in 50 and 2, it talked about the lofty underworks of the enclosure of the temple, talking about the inside double wall. And he talks about in the days the cisterns of water were diminished, and we find that even the ancient people, now I have some very old King James and some others that have the apocryphal writings in the center of the Bible, and in their footnotes, they didn't understand it, but they pointed out when it was speaking of the cisterns of water, and I believe it was referring to people. Now, I do believe that the translators, because they could not conceive, believe, and understand, this was talking about the very tabernacle, the house of glory of the Almighty, so they tried to wheedle it down into the Greek and then into the English and make it sound like a house here on this earth. But there's still plenty of clues. Here we are on side 2. But let's go back, the underworks of the enclosure of the temple, and he speaks of the cisterns of the water were not diminished. And so, who knows how many years ago, maybe 200-300 years ago, some of these people started to put these footnotes back in. I know that as I check this against my 1599 and 1560 Geneva Bible, I see that the later printers of the King James and so forth, they put their old ancient footnotes back in. That's why you really do need one of these old Geneva Bibles. Yes, I know that they're very expensive, but my friends, there's thousands of footnotes put in there by the writers and the great men that died for the Reformation and for the gospel. They didn't understand what they were doing, but in a lot of cases, but they knew their scripture, and they put the footnotes in here, even in these apocryphal books, and they believed that they were to be in here. You just ought to see all of the dozens and dozens of notes on every page here. And it refers you back. So let's go back, as they refer us back to 1 Kings and 7 and 23. Now, if you really want to get your preacher bent out of shape, if he's honest and you want to get him to really studying, you tell him to explain to you the longest parable in the Bible, which speaks of the tabernacle. But my friends, I know years ago when I was a young man and I was teaching in a small seminary, and we were discussing the temple and the tabernacle in the wilderness, and then the temple of Solomon and so forth. And then I saw how in the ancient language this name was changing all the time, and all of these different instruments. And I remember there was 27 men in the class that were already pastors, and they were asking me the meaning of all of this. And I told them, you finally nailed me to the wall. I really don't know. I really don't understand. I understood it in part, and I still have to be honest with you. I wish that I did understand it in toto, so to speak. But what good would it do? Who would there be out there that hears? And this is what I'm looking for, is some intelligent people who can follow along with me and possibly help me too, and send me some information and straighten me out. I'm sure that on some of these points I have gone awry, but maybe, hopefully this will get into the hands of some learned men who can really assist me in this project. But let's go to 1 Kings 7 and 23, and we will just get an idea what we're up against. I wish that we could go through the whole thing, but I don't want to be too boring. He made the molten sea of 10 cubits from brim to brim, round in compass. The height thereof was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits compassed it round about. And under the brim of it round about there were knobs, which did compass it for 10 cubits, compassing, that's what it reads, the sea round about. The knobs were in 2 rows, cast when it was cast. It stood upon 12 oxen. My friends, that's just another name for a bull. You remember what we said about Babylon and Egypt and in Iraq and in Nineveh? They had these bigger than life-size bulls with wings on them. My, what we've lost, what understanding. So now our Thor, the great bull. And I think that there is some very, very gigantic cherubims, or possibly that was talking about the great seraphim ships. That I have a lot of trouble finding information on the cherubium ships and the cherubs and so forth. I can understand most of that. But the seraphims, I can't find enough ancient evidence on that. But here now it speaks of 12 oxen. 3 looking towards the north, 3 looking towards the west, 3 looking towards the south, 3 looking towards the east. Now remember John of Revelation, he said, I saw 3 doors on the north, 3 doors on the south, east, and west. There was great doorways. But I don't believe that these bullocks were on the doors. I think Revelation, wasn't it? John described them as pearls and so forth. And he talks about, and the sea was set above them. Now this bowl, this water in it, was it showing the sea in space? And were these knobs around there, was it like a compass or a clock? Was it a clue, as like looking at an ancient map showing the 12 planets, the 12 signs of the zodiac, showing where the location of the house of the Almighty is? A lot of this I'm making brief because I want to end it up on this tape. And that's what I call little 6-pack out here. And if any of you are interested and you want to get into more detail on this, let me know. If there's enough interest, we'll go further with it. But I figure that this is the point where I'm going to lose most people anyway. They're going to think, boy, this guy's a squirrel. And it goes on to say, and all of their hinder parts were inward. In other words, the rear end of the bullock or the bull or the oxen here, they were back under the lavender, and the head was pointed out, showing those that were watchful, these great bull ships. They were guarding the entrance, and they were watchful. Now verse 26, and it was a handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, like the flower of a lily. Now remember what we just read in Ecclesiasticus there? He talked about the lily. My goodness, friends, what we have got to learn. I mean, if we're interested. But I don't know about you, but that disturbs me. He held 2,000 baths. In other words, measurement of liquid, I believe. And he made the 10 bases of brass, 4 cubits were the breadth thereof, and 3 cubits the height thereof of it. And verse 28, and the work of these basins were of this manner. They had borders, and there were borders between the edges. Now, my friends, was this showing, possibly, was this a copy, a pattern of the double wall of the cauldron? Thor's cup, the cauldron, the sacred bowl? I believe there's a possibility. Were borders between the ledges. Now, verse 29. And on the borders there were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubim. Now, we know that the ox and we know the lion, we know that they're a couple of great astronomical signs out there. And then we see, once again, let us remind you, in Egypt and Babylon and the ancient cities, they find pictures of lions with wings on their back. What were these lions? And on the ledges thereof there was a pedestal above and beneath the lions and the oxen. Now, what was this pedestal? Was this referring to, as in other chapters, porches and so forth? I know what I need to do here, but what I really need to do is get a word processor, a computer, and be real honest with you, I don't even know how to use one. I'm a biblical typer, seek and ye shall find. But I suspect here that these ledges is speaking of where it talks about coming out on the porch of the Lord. Well, anyway. And it says there were a pedestal above, and beneath the lions and oxen were wreaths of hanging work. And every base had 4 brazen wheels and axles of brass. And the 4 feet thereof had undersetters. Between the laver was the undersetters molten, with with wreaths at the side of each, and the mouth of it within the chapter, whatever that means, and above was a cubit, and the mouth thereof was round, after the work of a pedestal. Now, the mouth thereof round, was this describing the doors that went into the holy city that John described? A cubit and a half. And also upon the mouth of it were gravings, and their borders thereof 4 square, not round. I think this was added in by a transcriber, because John of Revelations, when he said this, he saw the city that was 4 square. Now, that's a little different than this right here, but I think that it was the pi times r square, measuring this holy grail, this house, this temple, this tabernacle, this holy city, etc. So I think the translators put it in there. Now, verse 32, and the 4 wheels were underneath the borders, and the axle trees. Now, see, a lot of people think that's talking about some sort of a tree if you're a city person, but being born on a farm, I know when you hook a team up and all, it speaks of the axle trees. Or farmer boys know what that is, at least if you're half a century old. And he says the axle trees of the wheels were in the base, and the height of a wheel was a cubit and a half, a cubit. Verse 33, and the works of the wheels were like the work of a chariot, and the axle trees and their felloes and their spokes and their naves, whatever, that were all molten. In other words, made of metal. Verse 34, and there were 4 undersetters at the 4 corners of each base. Now let's just jump down and start about the middle of verse 36. He graved the cherubims, lions, and palm trees, according to the space of each, with wreaths round about. And after this manner he made the 10 bases. All of them had 1 casting, 1 measure, 1 form. He made 10 lavers of brass. 1 laver contained 40 baths, and every laver 4 cubits, and upon every one of the 10 bases 1 laver. Now verse 39. And he set the bases 5 on the right side of the house, 5 on the left side of the house, and he set the sea on the right side of the house eastward, towards the south. So was that talking about southeast? I think that this is some corruption of the translators. Now verse 40, and Hiram made the lavers and the shovels and the basins. So Hiram made an end of doing all the work that he wrought for King Solomon in the house of the Lord. Verse 41, and the 2 pillars Now, we've discussed how the Egyptians have pillars. All right, and the two pillars and the two bowls of the chapters that were on top of the pillars, and the two networks to cover the two bowls for the chapters that were on top of the pillars, and the 400 pomegranates. Now the pomegranates, as I said before, if you turn one upside down, it's round and it looks like flames coming out of it. And so this is possibly, it was symbolic of great numbers of cherubim ships. I don't know. And for the two networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network to cover the 2 bowls on the chapters. And etc. We could go on. You can go back and read that for yourself. And we know also that the priests, on the bottom of their robes, around the hem at the bottom, they had the pomegranates. But there is a great deal to be learned. There's a great mystery here. If some wise young person, if you would get out a computer, if you get out Strong's Concordance, and get a Greek and Hebrew lexicons, and go back and trace these words down and look at the different versions and explanations, and we'd search into the 12 floors or 12 foundations John of Revelation talked about, we might come up with a real engineering feat of how and what the inside of the holy city looks like, and those that dwell on the inside of this gigantic space station. I know that a lot of the religious world is just going to utterly blow them away. One minute they sing, "Oh, how great thou art." And then when I tell them that God is real, just like Jesus Christ was real, that he ate bread and fish and said, "Here, Thomas, put your finger in my wound if that's what it takes you to believe." And so he ascended into heaven in a perfect body. And he's coming back in like manner, and the prophets of old said that we would again stand in our flesh. But I'm sure we're going to receive a much more glorious body, and throughout the eternities, and the great day of peace, when he said we will sit down at the great table with him, and he will wipe away every tear from every eye. There shall be no more sickness, death, mourning, wars. And then all they have to do is be concerned with helping the Almighty rule his government, reigning with him, as he will be King of kings and Lord of lords, as he populates those many houses that he said are in his house in the heavens. And he said that he was going to prepare a place for you also, that where he is you might be. And so, what a glorious thought it would be. I don't know about you, I'm not real interested. Man, if I could be back and look 18 or 20 or even 30 years old again and have the body and the vitality that I had then, and not worry about getting sick and going to dentists and dying, and think that I could reproduce and continue to have children. Hey, brother, if you want to go off to some steamy, fogged up ethereal heaven, you can have my place if I can have what I believe the real heaven is. There's a lot to think about, my friends. So I think we'll conclude on this note, and I thank you for listening. So write to me, Pilgrim Ships, P.O. Box 1086, Lakeview, Missouri 65737.